Something geeky this way comes. Episode 1. Random Acts of Geekiness. Hello, it's Dave here. I'm with my wife Alexandra. We're going to have a little conversation about general acts of geekery. Now, you started going to Star Trek conventions when you were quite young with your mother, didn't you?
Well, actually, I was a little bit older. I was probably about 22 when I went to my first convention with my mother. And it was quite embarrassing.
You tell.
She's a very big Star Trek fan. I grew up with watching Star Trek. And there was a very small convention in Melbourne, Florida. And James Doohan was there. He actually lived part of the time in Cocoa Beach in Florida. Of course, well before he died. But he was there, and we were the very last people to go up to him to get some pictures signed. And I still have the picture, in fact. And my mother started to gush about how much she loved him, how she started watching Star Trek from the very beginning. And he said, well, he didn't think she was old enough. And she said, no, that's my daughter, pointing to me. Okay, everything's fine. But then she said about one of the movies, she said, one of the movies that you were in, she said, and she put on a fake Scottish accent, and she said, there be whales. And he looked at her like, what the fuck? And I wanted to crawl under the table. And I couldn't get away from the fact that she was my mother. And but she made a complete twit out of herself.
I won't say it runs in the family then.
You better not.
No, been to some other things now. Didn't you go to something with Adam West or something to say he was a bit of an idiot?
Yeah, no, that was another one. I didn't go with my mother. I actually went with somebody I've seen before you. And yeah, it was one in Orlando. It's a very large convention in Orlando, comic book convention, still running. And we were in a very, very long queue. And there was a little boy in front of me, and he wanted to get, of course, Batman's signature on a picture.
This is the 1990s, it'd be Michael Keaton, wouldn't it? Like Adam West.
No, this was in the 1990s. Yeah, this was in the 1990s, but it was with Adam West. And he went up to Adam, and Adam told him that he couldn't sit there and give him a signature without him paying, I think it was $10 at the time, which was quite a lot of money.
Extortion.
Yeah, it was quite a lot of money. I think it was pretty certain it was $10. And the kid was screaming and crying because the parents refused. And see, Aurora just whinged, and she agrees with me. It was bullshit. So I went to go and pull out $10 to give to the kid, but the parents had taken him away by that time. But it left a very bad taste in my mouth.
I think that was generally the thing back then in the 1990s. You didn't really tend to pay for autographs, did you? That's kind of the norm now, isn't it? But back then, because I know people I used to go to Doctor Who conventions and you never paid for the actors' autographs back then. It's quite a recent thing, and it's kind of making the actors making money through doing the autographs. I think that's kind of caught on more in recent years, isn't it?
No, I think no. Yeah, you're right because, but then I had Sid and Marty Krofft. I actually just bought a like a a brochure, and they signed it, but I didn't spend nothing near $10 at the time. It's only a few dollars.
Yeah, I've said I've always intrigued by Sid and Marty Krofft because I remember seeing the Puff and Stuff movie when I was younger. And for years I'd tell people about it, and they would say, "What the fuck is that you're talking about?" And I say it's like sort of Sesame Street and acid. And then years later, I think I actually saw your book actually, and then sort of realised exactly what it was. Because my mother seemed to know about it, but that's probably because she knew Jack Wilde when she was a kid. So maybe that's kind of how I had my first exposure to sort of puff and stuff, really. Because also, didn't you go to a lot of conventions where you got your sort of comics and things signed? Because you're a big comic collector, weren't you, back in the 1990s? I was very impressed by all your Spawn you had when I first came around here, and I thought, yes, I'm going to marry that woman. I can't think why. I just want a Spawn comics.
Oh yeah, but you forgot that I got Wolverine number 50 signed as well.
You got Wolverine number 50 signed. Because also, didn't you get Bill Tucci's signature on some?
Yep. I have several Bill Tucci's, and I had the ash can that you could only get at a convention, and which we wound up selling on eBay, if I remember correctly. Got quite a lot of money for it. Yeah, so no, and I still have quite a bit of my comics, but we've now put them all together. And some of them, of course, Sebastian can't even look at the moment. Because, let's just say...
boobies!
Boobies! They're a bit risque. and hey, I was into X-Men too.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to love X-Men and everything. Yeah, still do.
Yeah. So the question is, did you find you were quite unique amongst your peers because you're, of course, a lady?
Yeah, actually, because I used to have a subscription with this guy in Melbourne, Florida. Fortunately, his business went went downhill, but he also did a massive baseball card collection. You know, he was very big into the sports memorabilia, but especially baseball cards. And he was able to pick, very uncanny, which comics would be the top ones. And I had a subscription with him, and anything that he felt was going to be top comics, he would put in my subscription thing and tell me, you need to get these. And of course, this girl got Preacher #1 because that way. And I got quite a few good ones and everything. Witchblade, that was all through him.
Wow, because also you're quite big into the sort of whole action figure collecting thing to begin with as well, weren't you? You were kind of one of the originators of that.
Oh, yes. Yes. I had a massive collection, especially I had... when Spawn came out, the McFarlane toys, I had all the originals, and I had the Angela with no panties even, which you probably would have liked.
Didn't inspire you, sadly, though, did it?
No, I think it would inspire you not to wear panties.
I don't already.
Yeah, I know, but stop stealing mine.
It was more comfortable than mine.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, but you know, you can only borrow, like my big pants. You can't borrow my lacy ones anymore. Your balls hang out on the other side of them.
No, I just wear tight to them then.
Yeah, no, but the idea of your balls being in my panties.
Anyway, getting back to the toys. Also, you're big on the Star Trek toys, I think, back in the 1990s?
Yes, I used to go to every flippin' Walmart within the 20-mile radius and look for all the rare toys. But you always knew that the bastards that worked there always tried to grab them. But a couple of times I was lucky and I got all the rare Star Trek toys. And I wound up, eventually, before I moved to Europe, I sold them all through the same guy who had, the comic book shop and everything. And I made a very, very nice profit. I made probably about $400 or $500 profit.
Of course, picked the right time, because now the Playmate Star Trek figures are worth absolutely bugger all on eBay now.
Oh.
I don't know, because there was a Red Data up about a year ago, went for about £30-40, if I remember rightly. But that was easy, a couple of hundred, wasn't it, back in the day?
Yeah, I had Red Data and everything. I had just about every single one of them. The only one I did not have was the Geordie LaForge with the removable visor.
Which I had and still have.
Well, whatever. So.
And did you have the Thomas Riker as well in
Yes.
the Next Generation outfit, not the Deep Space Nine one?
No, I had it with the Next Generation one. I sold that as well. All of them were sold. Everything got sold, just about everything. And because I couldn't bring them over, and it would have been just too much to bring everything over. And then I had some left over. I probably had about a small box left over. Left it with my mother and my stepdad, and they got ruined somehow, some way. I think it was a hurricane that came through, and some of the roof leaked and everything, and they got ruined that way. But instead of just like taking them out of the, cardboard and everything, and just like maybe washing, wiping down the plastic or whatever, the toys, they just went and chucked the whole thing without even speaking to me.
That doesn't surprise me somehow.
No, it doesn't surprise me either. But no, I mean, I was kind of a rarity going into the comic book shops back then. And I think even still now. I also played Magic the Gathering. That was one of my
I was
big
going
things.
to ask you about that as well, yes.
Yeah.
Because you're big into RPGs and things, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, and I played Vampire the Masquerade, the live action. And I was a Ventru. And I used to play that in university. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. But what I couldn't stand about it back then is you had some, of the ones that were doing, the role-playing, the ones that, the Playmasters. It just got involved with a lot of bullshit politics. And it's like, come on, it's a game. Hello?
I think people take these things far too seriously is the problem.
Yeah, they were. And then some of them were sitting there and trying to, like, act out their characters even when they weren't in character. And it was like, oh, fucking hell, get your fangs away from me, But the coolest thing is I used to have an iguana, and sometimes I would take him with me and everything and incorporated him into the game. But the iguana hated my guts, and he used to try to sit there and lash me all the time with his tail. So,
Your pets haven't improved really, have they?
No, they haven't. The rabbit is still, well, the rabbit likes me. She came up and greeted me today.
More than you, though.
No, she likes me better.
But we're having a secret affair, but that's still another.
Yeah, but that's only because you feed her.
Exactly.
I give her love.
I give more than love, I give her food.
Yeah.
Now, after you had a very long journey, of course, coming to the United Kingdom, you went here via Norway. So in Norway, was there much sort of geeky stuff going on, comic books in Norway and anything like that going on there?
There was not as much, no, but surprisingly enough, I got in Sweden, because, I used to go to Scandinavia a lot. Actually, in Sweden, I got my Dawn comics in Sweden very cheap, much cheaper than I could have gotten it in the United States. There were some comic places in Oslo, but it wasn't really as big, to be honest.
Yeah, as a question, in terms of the comic books out there, the same as the United States editions, were they?
They were, yeah, the ones that I bought. They were the same edition, the Cry for Dawns. I had the Cry for Dawns, and I had first printing ones. And I had some of them were not first printing, but some of them were, and as you know, we sold them on eBay. So, but they used to go for a fortune, absolute fortune on, years ago.
Now, the thing I noticed when I was in Finland is basically they had their own language comics there. They actually would translate American comics into sort of the native language. Was there much of that going on in Norway at all?
No, not at all, and everything. That's I found that they were English, and also in Sweden I found that they were in English language. The Finns probably just go by the beat of their own drums.
You're probably right, actually.
Yeah.
Now, of course, your next port of call, you came to Glasgow in the United Kingdom first. So, what did you sort of get involved with up there?
Not really much, actually. I was too busy getting my arse kicked by studying. While everybody else was out partying and everything, I was sitting there studying and found out that just everybody crams at the end of the year, which was quite unusual for me. I went to one comic book place there, and it was in Glasgow and everything, and it was okay and everything, but there were a couple of, role-playing games going on up there, but nothing major, nothing like when I was in Florida, no.
Right, and of course you found your way down to London eventually, and through many events. One night you went to Decadence, to Gossips in London Soho in 2004, and there was a fire alarm. And outside you got talking to a very strange-looking young man, didn't you?
Yeah, and I'm married to him now.
Yes, and that's how that part of the story continued or ended, however you look at it. And so now we've been together. We've been to quite a few things together, haven't we? We've been to sort of these sort of London Comic Cons, well, the Film and Comic Con. We've been to that mainly, haven't we?
Yeah. We have been to that one and everything, and we get our son to dress up, and it's quite fun. But it's not the same as the one that I used to go in Orlando. It's not even, none of, even the one we went to, the MCM. The MCM to me was just a bunch of posers.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but and also people were so fucking rude. And if one twit had gone and even shoved Sebastian, that would have been it. I would have been sitting there breaking out and, kicking some arse and everything. But in the MCM, to me, was just a bunch of posers. Look at me, I look so cool, check out my costume. I didn't feel it was about the love of it. It was more like, this is something cool to do. Whereas the London Film and Comic Convention, I do feel is more true to the people who actually love it, and they have a lot of comic book artists there. Some of them have come over from the States, and I recognize, quite a lot of them. But what I find very seriously lacking here in London is lack of comic book shops.
Yeah.
There was one in Orpington that used to be there, but it was very small, and it was in a dingy little place, and it just wasn't like what I was used to. I mean, I used to go to the comic book place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and it was massive. And then we went to several ones in Orlando, and you could see they're huge. They're like warehouse sizes.
Right.
And you could see people are playing games. There's actually role-playing games, card games, all kinds of things. It's still going quite strong there. But what I don't understand is why it's not going here in the United Kingdom. Although there is one. There is one role-playing game at Chislehurst Caves. There is one going, but I don't know, I know something about it, but we won't be able to bring Sebastian.
No, that's right.
He's too small.
Well, I think the whole thing with the costumes, it's kind of copying what's happened in the States. Again, you've been to things like San Diego and New York Comic Convention, have you?
No, but see, with the Orlando one, we didn't have really people in costumes. The ones who were in...
Yeah, it's more of a recent thing. I think probably in the last sort of 10 years it's kind of retaken off as the main thing.
Maybe.
Yeah, it seems to be this whole cosplay thing is where it's all kind of going now. You get this kind of thing where a lot, like, especially the girls that sort of dress up in the sort of rather revealing costumes become sort of quite famous just for cosplaying now. You get this sort of these name cosplay girls now, things like that. So I think that's kind of taken on its own kind of life now, really. What happened? I think it's kind of happening now over here, slowly sort of catching on like that. But things interesting to say about lack of comic shops. I mean, you think basically, when I lived in West London in the early 1990s, there was actually about 6 different comic shops basically around where I lived. I mean, originally there was just the one right in the 1980s, then there was 2, and then there was 3. It's like you grew up and then just imploded sort of in the 2000s. I think this whole scene's kind of really died. It's quite sad in a way. I mean, as I said, of those comic book stores I used to visit, I think only They Walk Among Us in Richmond still exists, and that's now called Ace Comics. It's part of a chain now, and the original couple that actually owned it, they've now sold up to this chain, which is quite sad. They're there for quite a number of years, and they're very nice people actually. So it's kind of sad that a little part of my teenage years went when they sold on their shop. But yeah, I know what you mean. But this is kind of one of the things I was thinking about while I wanted to talk about this. I do kind of feel, obviously you're from the United States, and can obviously have a slightly different view on this. I kind of find maybe sort of in the UK people are a bit more shy about this kind of thing. They don't kind of wear their colours on their sleeves so much. They're a bit afraid to be seen as being geeky. Whereas maybe in the States, maybe people are a bit more open and honest about it. Just seems when we're there, a lot of people seem more okay to talk about. I remember we were in the supermarket once. I was wearing the Doctor Who T-shirt, and the girl just suddenly started talking to me, didn't she, about Doctor Who? So it's kind of people seem to be more willing to talk about it. Whereas in the UK, it's kind of maybe still treated a little bit of suspicion still.
The only reason why she was sitting there talking to you and everything is she probably thought you were one of the creatures.
You probably love my horrible nasal accent.
Yeah, what do I call you? Repressed homosexual limey bastard.
We've got to try and keep this podcast family friendly.
It got to be keep it what?
Family friendly.
That is family friendly. Have you heard have you heard the stuff that our son comes out with?
That's our son. He's not most kids.
Yeah. What does he call you?
He called me an arsehole earlier.
Yeah, but he also calls you an ass freak.
Yes, if anyone knows what the word arse freak means, actually please leave a comment at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I'd like to know too and everything, but we kind of think it's something, I don't know, if he was more grown up and everything, we would think it's something more...
Something to do with 2 men together, I think, is probably what I'm implying.
But I think in his mind, he thinks he's being really nasty.
You're probably correct there.
Yeah, no, but getting back to your Doctor Who T-shirt and everything, that's because people over in the States, they like the British accent. She probably heard you say something. Either that or she thought you looked weird.
No, in all seriousness, do you think people are more kind of open to that kind of thing? That people are a bit more, like I said, wear the colours on their sleeves a bit more and kind of aren't so shy about sort of these kind of things.
I think it's still seen as a geek thing, though. But I don't think people really give as much of a toss as you do here. I think you lot are just a bit too, well, stick up your bums.
That's a stereotype.
Oh, like I said, what were you talking about, my lace panties?
They're very comfortable, thank you very much.
And what was that, you stuck up your bum?
I don't know his name, I'll find out later.
Okay.
That was a joke, by the way, everybody.
No, but I do. I think you guys are a bit more of a bit, I don't know, reserved. I'm being polite.
That's true. I mean, the way I see it also, I think also in the States as well, there's more of a crossover into other things. Like, of course, both of us are very big into sort of, heavy metal, alternative kind of goth subculture as well. I think there's more of a crossover in the States between that and sort of geek culture. It seems to be, from what I can see, a lot of people are into that kind of thing, are into sort of geeky stuff too. Like you see a lot of these sort of geek burlesque shows and things like that now, which you don't really see over in the UK. But I think over here, it seems, I've always thought when we would go to these conventions in London that we would see people we knew from the goth and metal scene. I think we've seen around over 2 people, haven't we knew on the on both separate occasions. Yeah. So that quite surprised me, actually, thinking a lot of these people into the same sort of thing. Well, some actually are into this sort of thing. I mean, that's something I've often thought I find it quite hard to talk to them. There's like 2 people I know of on the goth scene or rock metal scene who are into this sort of thing, who post on sort of forums that I post on. But I've never had the real bottle to actually go up and have a physical conversation in person with them about it. Like, obviously one being Marcus, who was on Big Brother a few years back. He's an avid action figure collector we saw on the show, and he does a lot of sort of custom work. He did a fantastic Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade tank. He sort of posted on the Rebel Scum forum a few years back. It was amazing. I want to see guys saying, "Man, dude, that was amazing." But it's like, it's a weird thing to say to somebody sort of in the middle of a club,
Yeah, but we saw him at one of the conventions. Why didn't you go up to him then?
If we think I was a complete weirdo.
Yeah.
And put after hearing this podcast, we will think I'm a complete weirdo.
Yeah, but that's, he might be right, but I think it's an English thing. Because let me tell you something, I would have no qualms of going up to him and yapping to him about it. I mean, I don't see what your major malfunction is about it. I mean, just go up and everything, flipping hell. Just don't sit there and, be a twit, But, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm different and everything. Maybe I'm just, a typical American. I don't know, And don't you dare turn around and say I'm a warmonger.
Nothing of the sort.
You say it all the time.
I don't say it, I just know it.
Yeah, every time, see, there you go. Every time our son is there and gets aggressive, you say he's taken after the American side. Whatever.
What else is there to say, really? So, as we were sort of saying about kind of, we noticed a kind of change in these conventions, really, where kind of it seems to be more kind of style over substance these days.
Yes.
I mean, the thing I will say, though, because I remember my experiences going to sort of what they would call comic conventions in the late 1980s, where literally all it was basically a big hall somewhere sort of in central London. And basically, you'd have like one artist doing signatures, and you could probably buy the odd piece, and that was the only sort of money you would give them. But the major thing I noticed about it was there was no girls there. Whereas you go to these conventions we go to now in London, and it almost seems to be like 50% male and female. I mean, that seems to be a big change to me. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, but I don't think, the only thing is that what I've seen now, and it kind of, doesn't, maybe there's something, with me and everything that I don't get it. Is that what I see is that they seem to be influenced by that Japanese cosplay type of thing, and they're always trying to look like anime and manga and all that crap. Well, I'm not being funny and everything, but that just reminds me of pedophile crap. I mean, that, look at me, I got big eyes and everything, and I'm wearing a little tiny skirt and everything, but I'm trying to look very young and everything. I mean, I'm sorry, but that to me is not what the original comic conventions were about. Because when I do remember the Star Trek convention, there were some people dressed up in Star Trek costumes and things like that. That one that I told you about, that my mother. No, we weren't. Not very funny. But no, I do remember some, but it wasn't like, overwhelming like it is now. And then when I went to the comic convention, it was serious, it was very serious.
Oh, hardcore back then.
I was hardcore, more hardcore than you'll ever be. But it was very different. And also, I think being female, I kind of grew up in a very different environment because my mother was a Trekkie, still is, very much a Trekkie fan, very much into the sci-fi and everything. And I grew up with horror movies and sci-fi. That's what I grew up with. And, so she brought me to see Star Wars when it was still in the theaters, because that was like the big thing. We were going to go and see it. And we saw it many times together, more than once together, because we loved it. And so I think in some ways I'm a bit of a different female, plus, I'm into computers. I'm the one that keeps our computers going,
I wreck them.
You wreck them and I fix them. So in some ways I'm probably very male in that way.
I just think your reward was basically in later life you lived in a house full of images of Harrison Ford.
Sorry?
And your reward later in life was to live in a house full of images of Harrison Ford.
God, no, it's not with the way he looks like now. Flippin' hell.
I'm talking about my wonderful giant bust over there and my sideshow Heroes of Rebellion Han Solo and things like that in my glass cabinet over there.
But that was nice and everything. He was nice back then, Yeah, he was nice and hot back then.
Yeah, which kind of probably leads on to my next thing, because I kind of feel in a way it did seem kind of cool about 7-8 years ago. The whole geek thing was kind of cool, I felt, in the UK. Well, I kind of feel it's been on the slide a little bit in recent years, and I think because there's two things I think were kind of quite big sort of 8-10 years ago was obviously Star Wars was in the cinemas again with the prequels. Obviously, we all have different opinions about those now, but it was
more than 10 years ago when the first Star Wars came out after so many years and not having any Star Wars.
Yeah, but I'm kind of saying basically it was kind of, we still had the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, didn't we?
Yeah.
So it was still kind of very much an active thing. And of course, and I think you're not such a huge fan of, but obviously Doctor Who came back as well 10 years ago. And obviously that was a real shot in the arm because it was obviously a British science fiction series. And, even though I kind of have varying feelings about how it's been of late, I mean, that first series of Chris Eccleston I really enjoyed. It was like, obviously, there was a few odd episodes, but I mean, I thought he really gave something to that part and really made it sort of relevant to sort of a modern audience. Some of the Doctors is sort of Northern hard man rather than just an eccentric old man. So that kind of livened things up a bit. As I kind of think, as years have gone by, really, it's kind of been no big hit of film like Star Wars in the cinema. Doctor Who's become a bit like part of the furniture again, really, and...
But there's still some good sci-fi films out there, I mean, one that's a little bit old now is District 9. Yeah. And District 9 is quite an interesting take and everything on,
it's a
on
South
it.
African one, isn't it?
I don't remember where it's from, but I really liked District 9.
Yeah, it's the one that's kind of the sort of the analogy of apartheid, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there still are some good, sci-fi films out there, but no really major blockbusters. The problem that we're having now is, especially with some of the remakes, is that Hollywood is taking some of the movies and everything, like some of the remakes even, and it's just all digitalized, they've all been done to a formula. And, it's not like the old sci-fi films and everything, it's all for, just a formula. And tons of, explosions and things like that. But very little plot, and that's...
Back in my day.
I know, back in the old days, back in my day.
Yeah, because, I mean, the main thing that's kind of kept things going in the last few years has been all the Marvel superhero films, but I kind of feel they've gotten to be a little bit kind of by the numbers, really, haven't they? There's very much a formula in those now. I kind of think they kind of live or die by the actual performances of the actors, I find. Yeah. Because I really like the Iron Man films, because I really like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I think he's got real charisma and really gives something to that part.
Well, Wolverine was quite good,
I like him as an actor, but I didn't like I haven't seen the second solo Wolverine film yet.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. Actually, I watched it.
Oh, right, okay. Now I know that. I'll have to go and watch that as well.
It was not so much an action pack, let's sit there and blow everything up and everything. It was more about, because Wolverine was always my favorite character out of the X-Men.
That's based on the Frank Miller 4-part miniseries, isn't it, from 1982, that one?
Yeah. I mean, Wolverine was always my favorite and everything, because I always felt that there was a lot more to Wolverine. And, than the other characters. The other characters were good and everything, don't get me wrong. You know, and I did, probably my second favorite was probably Magneto, you know, because he came from a really, really messed up background and everything. You can kind of see why he turned the way he turned.
Yes, I always liked him as well for that reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, and the Nazi thing and, you know, the World War II and, you know, concentration camp stuff. But Wolverine, there was just something about Wolverine that really caught my eye. I really liked him. And there was just, you know, he was a very tortured person. You can see he's a very tortured person and everything, but also a very good person. But then mixed up with that was this extreme violence and rage.
But like you, really, isn't he?
Yeah, well, now you know why not to mess with me.
Because what I don't like about Wolverine though in recent times, again, I'm not a huge comic reader anymore, but I don't like the way they've given so much of his past away. I mean, when I read about him, you know, when I was an avid reader back in the 1980s, there was this big mystery about where did he come from, how old was he? You know, he had all these sort of tales of being involved with ancient samurais and being in World War II, and you think, Jesus, how old is this guy? You know, and it was kind of cool to sort of have this kind of mystical background to him, whereas now they've kind of given this proper origin, you know, when he was born, you know, how him and Sabretooth are linked together. It's kind of sporty a bit, I find, really.
Yeah, I agree and everything. And I do agree and all that. And even Sabretooth, even when they, you know, the other, in that film that we watched and everything with Sabretooth in it, it just didn't follow along with the comics. But also, speaking of movies, there's a Lady Death movie out. I have yet to watch it. Yeah, I have yet to watch that Lady Death.
We can find that later and watch that.
Yeah, but I did find it and everything, but I didn't even know that there was a Lady Death movie.